quite a difficult issue because it's unpopular.
Senator D'Amato, I talked to a number of people in the reserve today, and all of them were willing to do what they have to do, but some of them were saying, listen, this thing is unfair, to say the least, and a number of them mentioned the profits of oil companies. Now, fairly or unfairly, are you hearing that kind of talk from the reservists?
Well, you know, we have a number of units, Dan, from the New York area, from our upstates, from Syracuse, Rochester. As a matter of fact, one of the units in Long Island are being activated. And there is a tremendous economic loss that many of them are bearing as a result of the differential between their pay in the private sector and what they're receiving in their military pay. Some of them don't work for municipalities and large companies which are holding them harmless between the difference. And so, yes, there is a great deal of harm, and I have heard those complaints. I think one of the things we should do is to seek a greater contribution from the Saudis. They should not be permitted to make any profits, any windfall profits, as a result of our coming to their aid. And I think some of our allies have got to make a greater contribution, the Japanese and some of our European allies. So that is still a question to be heard from. And of course, the oil profits that have gone up with Chevron and some of the other companies, I think, are rather unconscionable.
Senator D'Amato, Congressman Hamilton, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
The war hits home everywhere in this country, but for a high school basketball team in Kansas, it hits home with particular force. Frank Courier has the story.
Till this week, the Junction City Blue Jays were just another scrappy small-town basketball team in the middle of Kansas. But tonight in high school tournament play, they are children of war.
I'm doing fine. I don't worry too much. My mother's doing enough worrying for all of us.
Well, I just tell them that they got to keep going because their father would want it that way. You know, he wouldn't want them to stop living because he's not here.
Her husband, Kenneth, Micah's father, is an infantry sergeant in Saudi Arabia.
1, 2, 3.
And so too are the fathers of Micah's teammates. More than half the Blue Jay squad has a parent in the Gulf. So basketball is not only a passion, but now a welcome diversion.
You know, it wouldn't be good just to worry 24 hours a day. And again, I think this really helps them, you know, at least for a couple hours a day, whether it be practice or a game, take their minds off that a little bit.
With so many fathers off to war, mothers must cheerlead alone, and there are thousands in Junction City, Kansas, a proud military town that has made the sacrifice in wars before, that can't forget its heroes past and present, on the streets, in the schools.
I think it's very important if we're going to help the kids in this situation. They need to understand there's nothing they can do.
Stationed at Fort Riley, headquarters of the Army's 1st Infantry Division, and home to most of the Blue Jay basketball team. As a reminder of war, they wear yellow ribbons on their jerseys, but most don't need reminding. Antoine Jones' father is a command sergeant major in a tank unit.
I thought that maybe Saddam Hussein was going to back out before the January 15th deadline, but he didn't.
Try to keep his mind off of it because my husband's going to come back safe, you know. We all believe that.
Tonight, the Blue Jays played to win in a tribute to their fathers, who, if not for war, would have filled the bleachers. Said one player tonight, though they lost, "My dad promised he'd come back the way he left. In one piece," he said, "and cheering us to victory." Frank Courier, CBS News, Wichita.
In the Baghdad area, airstrikes have started. It's a massive operation.
Total destruction, like it's supposed to be happening.
You're satisfied?
I'm satisfied. We didn't come to play.
We came in with everything we had, and we're not done yet.
And over at Baghdad just looked like a 4th of July party, you know, fireworks going off.
You know people are throwing stones at you, and you want to, you kind of get a little ticked off, and you go, whoa, let's take this guy out.
We saw some damage to one target, and the target that our flight hit was heavily damaged.
Well, I've been training for 13 years for this day. It's like being a professional athlete and never playing a game. Today was the first game, and the enemy didn't show up. The opponent didn't show up. We went out there and ran our first play, and it worked great. Scored a touchdown. There was nobody home.
Come on, do it. Stop.
How'd it go, buddy?
There's no doubt in my mind what the final result of this is going to be. It's just going to be how long it takes Saddam Hussein to figure it out.
If he had a half a brain, he'd quit before we do him any more damage.
Oh, when the Scuds come flying in. Oh, when the Scuds come flying in.
We picked up the symbolism, tracked it in, and destroyed the target. At the time, we realized it was a Scud missile. Pretty excited after it happened. We are the first Patriot battery in the history of the world to knock down a Scud missile.
We've got an awesome display of air power here, and they can send anything they want. We'll take care of business.
It's kind of scary to think what damage we're going to be doing and how many lives we're going to be taking with what we're shooting off and stuff. It's kind of scary.
This is what we're here for right there. That's what it's all about.
The war will be a tough one, as all wars are. People will lose their lives. War is not fun.
Well, I'm not glad about the aspect about going to war, and I don't think any Marine sitting here in this desert is, but something's happening, and it's the start. It's the start of something.
Now what's going to happen? That's what I'm worried about, what happens next.
The entire world waits and watches now to see what happens next and when will the war end. CBS News and this CBS station will be watching the Persian Gulf.
Understand that we have an integrated campaign here. That campaign could go on for a considerable amount of time, and I don't think progresses will be able to make a better prediction. But remember, we're only really just barely over 3 days into this campaign now, and it's too early to predict anything.
Okay, 3 days into this campaign, over 3 days into it, you've begun to pummel the Republican Guards, those elite tank units in southern Iraq and northern Kuwait. Can you give us an update on exactly what part of that part of the war?
Well, I think that to say that we are pummeling the Republican Guard is probably an overstatement. We're continuing to execute the strategic portions of the campaign as they have been planned all along. The Republican Guard has always been one of many targets that we were going after. We've had a great deal of success in achieving most of our objectives. In those areas where we haven't achieved those objectives, we're going to continue to retarget until such time that we feel we have.
General, we built up 400,000 troops in the Gulf in hopes that we would make Saddam Hussein blink. We then went to war, beginning with a massive air campaign, and hoped that we would break his army and break their will. What can you tell us right now about mass defections, any defections, if at all, of Iraqi forces in Kuwait or elsewhere?
There have been defections all across the front in the last few days. We've had defections to Egyptian troops. We've had defections to American troops. We've had defections to Saudi Arabian forces. Not in mass numbers. I think that there are several reasons for that. Number one, I doubt if many of the troops in the front lines know what's going on in downtown Baghdad or throughout all of Iraq. I would say, secondly, that many of them are probably scared to death of what will happen to them if they come across the line, and we're doing everything we can to convince them that they're not in danger if they do come across. I think, number three, they're all behind rather massive barriers themselves, and they're probably just as afraid of their own minefields and their barriers and trying to get through them to come to us. So I think it's too early to see mass defections.
Well, you have referred to some defections, and how many prisoners of war have we taken? Are we talking about tens or hundreds?
Well, defections and prisoners of war are two different subjects. So we've taken 23 prisoners of war to date. The defection numbers, as I say, they vary across the theater, and I wouldn't really be able to give you a specific now, but it's not large numbers to date.
General, to continue talking about some numbers, we've been told by briefers that in the airstrikes, about 80% of the missions of the sorties have been successfully engaging the targets. But what does that mean? I think people would like a better, more precise definition. Does that mean hitting the targets or destroying the targets?
Generally, when we talk about a successful execution of a mission, it means that the aircraft have arrived at their target, that they have released the munitions on the target, and that they are reasonably sure that those munitions have landed exactly on or close to the target that they were aimed at.
And what is your post-bombing analysis telling you so far in terms of the accuracy of the destructive ratio, if you would call it that?
Well, you know, the battle damage assessments that we've seen thus far have been very, very encouraging. But you can imagine that with a vast number of targets that we've been going after, it's awfully difficult, number one, to cover them all this quickly and to figure out what we've done. And number two, then even when you cover some of them, you can tell that a very good example is you can say you were going after a command and control center of some sort, and you found that the bomb landed directly in the middle of your target, but it's a target that's deeply underground. The question is, how much damage have you accomplished? These things are measured by other ways, by determining the effectiveness of their radars, if it was a command and control center for radar, etc. So there's a lot of different ways to do this, and it's not a precise science.